I'm talking to Kat Whyte on her journey from being a championship sailor to working behind the iconic American bar at the Savoy Hotel in London. Her journey through competition bartending, and then finally creating your own path in this industry. Cheers. Cheers, Kat Whyte.
Oh, delicious.
So basically maple old fashioned, but it's called Wood Crunches because that's one of the 7 worlds of Hennessy XO flavor profiles. And yeah, that's my cocktail because
Beautifully balanced. That touch of salt just brings out that flavor of the XO so well. But you still get that nice little touch of Canadian maple.
Yeah.
A staple of your fine self.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody doesn't hold up the maple industry, who will?
That is very true.
Yeah, and it's interesting that I talked about this before, but that sugar is such this demonized thing, but we need it to taste things. And now we have this world where maple, even health practitioners are saying like maple and honey and things like that, like those naturally derived sugars, actually have some benefit. And there may be enough benefit
for sure.
to outweigh the negative that it is sugar.
I mean, there's a reason that when you're sick, you have a honey tea or, you have those sort of homely flavors. In my head, that's beneficial straight away. And you kind of have that instant sort of psychological connotation that honey is going to be healthier because when you were sick, you would add it to your nice cup of lemon hot water. I'm a big avid fan, funnily enough, of utilizing agave instead of your classic castor sugar.
I like a hot toddy when I'm sick.
Oh my gosh, yes.
I think it's one of those things of it makes you feel better, so you end up having more than one or two, and then at some point you reach this like tipping point of I don't know if you're better
or you're just having too much of a good time.
Or you just don't care anymore, and you're like, yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah, no, a hot toddy is one of my go-tos, especially I used to make them for my father quite a lot when he came back from work on a Friday evening. It was one of the ones that we'd sort of finish the night off with. I loved adding in a cheeky little touch of cinnamon, but not too much because otherwise it just takes away from everything else. It's one of those kind of weird barks that you need to be really careful with the levels, but when it brings out those flavors, rather than just utilizing Scotch, I was always an avid fan of adding in some cognac in there too. Just rounds it off, gives it a little bit more of that sort of honey-esque, that fruity flavor. And yeah, it warms the soul. So what's not to love about that?
Yeah. So talk to me about your journey here.
The big one.
So yeah, we're at the Savoy Hotel at the, how do you pronounce it? The
The Beaufort Bar.
Beaufort Bar.
Yep.
And this one, I mean, the Savoy is known for the American bar. And the first time you showed me this bar, I didn't know this bar existed.
Yeah, it's
and
our little almost hidden secret.
And I was like, I don't ever need to go back to the American bar because this bar is more my aesthetical jam.
Yeah, it's a little bit more avant-garde. It's a little bit more in your face. The American bar is that quintessential classic cocktail bar. It's, a staple for a lot of, what people have aspired to create in their own bars. But with the Beaufort, it's a little bit more fun. It's a little bit more, not necessarily relaxed, but it has that ability to sort of push the boundaries in what cocktails they're making and what spirits they're serving, because they don't necessarily have to stay true to classic cocktail trends, whereas American bar, it's a classic cocktail bar. You're going to be shelling out classics all night long, whereas here you have that ability to be a little bit more sort of playful and experimental.
Yeah, and this bar is raised in the middle of the room.
It's beautiful. The bar actually sits on the old stage, so we used to have all the performers
That makes
here.
sense.
And then we decided to make the bartenders the stage, which at the end
beautiful.
of the day, that's what it should be, because they're the ones whipping up the beverages and creating the scene for everybody in the first place. So, and having the DJ in here as well creates a little bit more of that sort of fun, atmospheric vibe. I mean, this bar has won a multitude of awards. I mean, they won Best International Bar Team at Tales. So they've got their standing point. They've done the hardcore work. And now that we've got Marcus as the new bar manager, that new fresh intake of that sort of pizzazz and that look for the future of what the Beaufort bar can be, that's really, really exciting. So it's nice to be able to work between both bars, which admittedly, yes, it can be a little bit difficult switching between two very, very different styles of service. while still being 5-star. But it's one of the things I really love about being at the Savoy is that I have the opportunity to do both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So where did you start in
So-
this industry, or what led you to this industry, then led you all the way up?
So I actually was a sailing coach. So I used to sail almost professionally. I used to race for Great Britain throughout the ages of 10 all the way up until I was 18. The day I turned 18, I flew to Australia because it was the furthest away place that I could think of. And growing up in a small town in Scotland, I was very much ready to go out and see the rest of the world, having done a lot of travel growing up. So went over to Australia, got to winter, and apparently they don't sail in winter. And I was essentially out of a job. So I got chatting away to the hostel bar manager that I was living in at the time and ended up pulling pints for free accommodation. And that was it. It literally, there was something about being in the industry when I was at that kind of young age, the people I was getting to meet, the fun we were having, getting to learn about the industry as a whole from the sort of party side. Then when I moved back to the UK and was at university, I kind of continued that, but moved more towards sort of the hostess management side, working in a multitude of nightclubs and sort of doing that sort of more table service and lots of sparklers and running around a nightclub in heels, which was something that I have managed to craft relatively well. And then it kind of got to that point where I had finished my degree. It was in sport medicine, so, could have done something relatively cool with it, travel and whatnot. But there was something about the hospitality industry that had just fully hooked me. I knew I wanted to stay a part of it. I knew I wanted to grow within it. And I was really, really lucky. I had a job in Edinburgh, a magical place called the Basement Bar and Restaurant. And there was a wonderful gentleman called Alec Duncan, and he just took me under his wing. And he was my general manager, took me to the side and was like, you've got something here and you want it, so let's go and get it. Within a year, I was general manager of the place at 24 years old.
Yeah.
And that was it. That was me. I was hospo cat, got into tequila because we were a Mexican bar. So that's where the spark of agave came from. And I can blame Megs Miller for a lot of that too. And then the opportunity arose after doing comps and sort of moving around different cocktail bars. I kind of got to that point where it is unfortunate, but in order for myself to grow even further and to be a bigger part of the industry, I knew I had to do the move to London. And the opportunity arose the second that Chelsea Bailey announced that she was going to be the head bartender of American Bar. I actually sent my CV to Anna Sebastian because I hadn't written one in a really long time. And she called me pretty much, a couple of minutes later, was actually like, oh, well, there's this opportunity at the American Bar. Would you like to come?
Yeah.
And you don't really say no to the Savoy, especially American Bar. For me, that was, I can vividly remember the very first day I put on that white jacket and I cried. I cried so hard in the changing rooms in that white jacket with my tie. It was a moment that sort of resounded me being like, okay, yes, I've done this. I have moved to London. I have nailed it. Now I can start looking at future.
Yeah. And what, how is leaving something as competitive as sailing and going into, and knowing you were going into bartending, which is,
I guess in a way
not viewed in the same light in a lot of ways. Yeah.
True. But there is still that very much competitive aspects in the industry, especially when it comes to comps. I knew that, I would only really focus on one comp a year because that was one that I wanted to do and I was going to win it. Because growing up sailing, if it didn't come away with a medal, it wasn't always the funniest drive home. But yeah, for me, I always sort of definitely focused on that one core comp and put all my focus and energy into that one rather than spreading myself out over 4 or 5 within 1 year. But yeah, there's definitely that competitive element, even just in general bartending, there's the competitiveness between, who's on 50 best, who's on top 500, who's on top 50. There's all these different awards coming out and, the new Pinnacle Awards too. I think it's definitely difficult to kind of toe that line in between what then turns into ego. So I think that's definitely a problem that we have in the industry and always will have. But I have seen a lot more of people sort of reverting back to actually just championing each other, which has been beautiful. I think COVID had a lot to do with that. Everyone sort of rallied together, and there's definitely still that ego kicking about and that competitiveness, but it's now a lot more subdued, and it's a bit more sort of, no, we're actually all in this together and we're going to grow together.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember somebody asked me a question at, it was the Bon Vivant Festival in Barcelona, a new cocktail festival. And they said, I'm on a panel, and they said, like, how do I make my bar successful? And it was just like, okay, wait, what do you mean by successful?
Yep.
Like, I could tell in the phrasing, it's like, and what we had been speaking about is like, do you want to win awards?
Yeah.
Like, well, if you reach a certain level, then we'll get you a PR agency, and you can get in front of the right people, or, you know, you get some people to fly in, do some guest shifts, and you get noticed more. But that level, it's like everybody can get to. Or do you want to be able to, like, pay your rent, pay your staff, put some money in the bank,
Yep.
and have the same bar 25 years from now?
Exactly.
It's like success is something different to everyone.
Yeah.
And what do you think about the industry and the awards right now? Because it feels like we're chasing the chef world. Like, we're always a few years behind the chef world. And
Yes.
that Michelin program is beautiful, but then you get the stress and the, like, there's been, you know, chefs taking their lives when they lose a star.
Yeah. It's, I mean, we will always be that sort of half step behind the chef world just because of the way the industry developed. But I think with brands like, and the bar awards like Pinnacle, the new one that's coming out, I think that is sort of trying to be the sort of new variation of Michelin, and not necessarily be like, oh, well, you're on a top 50 list, but you have, you know, you're either excellent, middle, or you still get essentially the 1 star, and creating more of like a guidebook. Ideally, it would be nice to not necessarily have to apply for that sort of thing. I'm not really sure how it's all come together.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, they should probably be a little bit more open about it too, because we don't really know like what's going on with it, just as general chit chat within the industry. Like, we've heard of it, we know it's a new bar award thing, but apart from that, I don't really know anything else. And I think you've already got top 50, you got 50 best. The one thing that I will say is the highlighting awards for, you know, ones to watch. Those are the ones that I get really excited about at 50 best, because the people there, especially people like Mr. Paradise, them getting that, beautiful. It's 5 years in the running. They needed that for sure. And I think that will help them grow massively. And it's definitely what the team needed. But I'm not necessarily sure whether we should, that should be the be all or end all.
Yeah, I find it,
there's more to life than having a trophy on the back bar. If your staff are going away happy after every shift, they're able to pay their rent, they're able to treat themselves as well. They can take holidays when they want to be able to. They don't necessarily have to work Christmas. There's so many other areas that I would view as successful rather than just the plates that you have on the back bar.
Yeah, I think it's, I mean, how big can you get if you're constantly full? Of like regulars that might live a block away? Do you need a guest to come from the other side of the planet?
No, I mean, like, every now and then it's nice to do. You know, give your guests a sort of additional experience, and those regulars, you know, once every now and then. But I don't think it's one of those things that you have to do every week to be noticed or to be seen. I mean, it's great for the bartenders to be able to travel and to experience new places, and it can work really well if it's done right. But if it's overdone, then it just becomes monotonous, and then every guest shift is the same, and it's the same layout, and it's the same sort of variations of drinks, and you're not necessarily actually learning anything from it or gaining any knowledge. And for me, guest shift should be able to impart a little bit of knowledge. You should be able to come away and be like, oh, okay, there was this new technique that he used in this drink, or she used in this drink, or there was this really cool style of ice that they used, or they brought over this really cool ceramic glass, or, you know, just little things that you can walk away from rather than just going for the sake of being seen at a guest shift.
I think, to go back to the Pinnacle Awards, I think they have an outside agency that they're pairing with that has judges around the world.
Okay.
Because presumably that is the biggest value of the Michelin program, that they have.
They have their
judges
their
that
guys
judge
around
by
the
the
place.
same standards
Yeah.
everywhere in the world, and they've got great palates, great eye for
Yeah.
detail, all of that. And so it's gonna. I'm quite excited about it. For those
I'm really
that
interested
haven't
to
heard about
see.
it, it's essentially, as you described, like a star system. For instead of your 1 out of 50, it's or your 25 out of 50.
Yeah.
It's you get 1 star, 2 star, 3 star,
3-star.
and it's.
And you get in the book and you
And
get
that's brilliant.
recommended, and it's growing the scene as well, and it'll hopefully get more words out about cute little local bars. Like there's this wonderful bar in Rotterdam, Bar La Soirée, opened by a guy called Ben, and it is one of the best bars I have been to in the good last few years. But nobody really knows about it yet.
Yeah, they'll never make an award because
No,
they don't.
because they're a
they don't
small,
try,
cute little bit.
but
They're on the corner, right next to the river. Like it's just one of those beautiful places that adapts as well. They've got their breakfast, and then it turns into a little beautiful cafe for the afternoon, and then it develops into a cocktail bar. They've covered all their bases, and it's stunningly presented, and the drinks are spectacular. But it's not necessarily one that's going to end up on a list anyway.
Yeah.
But it's one that I will always scream and shout about. And I think the best thing about the industry now is that we're starting to speak up more about the smaller bars. We're starting to showcase the little ones through word of mouth. And I think that's the best way that you can promote a bar anyway, is if you hear somebody's had a really good time at one down the road, you're more than likely going to go and give it a try over scrolling through a list of endless bars that you're supposed to have been to. So
When I, a little cheat I have when I go into, if I haven't just put it out there, like I'm going to this city, never been there before, where should I go? I'll just go and look up best bars in said city. And it could be Yelp, it could be any review that comes through. And you can just sort of like look through photos and almost tell what ones are like,
especially the
put
ones
there
taken
weirdly
by the people from Google.
or that should be there. And you can just be like, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember years ago, somebody, an agency for Hennessy tried to get me, they were like, oh, can you write a training program on how to tell how to talk to a bar, like how to judge a bar's level by just like walking in.
Interesting.
And I was like, I'm sure I could, but that sounds like a really full-time job.
Yeah.
And also,
That's not like a couple of weekends
also
here and there.
not my
That's
job.
A full development program.
yeah, because it's like you're sort of summarizing, like when I walk in, if I walk into a pub, I'm scanning first the draft line.
Yep.
And then I'm scanning the back bars. If
Oh,
I walk into
I'm
a
scanning the
cocktail bar,
snacks for sure.
whereas I walk into a cocktail bar and I'm looking at different things, and that's a really, I don't know how to summarize that years of.
No,
years
because that's
of
just something that you
attention,
kind of
yeah.
learn over time as well. You know, the more you go out and the more you experience different venues and different bars, and the more you travel and get to see it in other cultures as well, the more you're then gonna sort of develop your own personal view of what makes a great bar.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's interesting seeing other people's perspectives, because it is, at the end of the day, it's all personal preference. It's all a social sort of gathering, but it's difficult to describe. You can't necessarily be perfect for everybody, but there seems to be that huge focus on, well, no, that's what you have to do.
Which is why I like the idea of a star system over that of like, you're the best, because
I agree.
If you said this bar's the best, and it's an agave focused bar, and I don't like agave,
then
that's obviously not going to be the best bar for me.
no.
And so it's I'm excited to see where
I'm
we go with
excited
that.
as well, and it'll be interesting to see how the bars that have started off with 1 star do and like develop, and see whether they sort of gain more and more recognition as well. I feel like that'll be really interesting to see
I hadn't
how
thought
they
about that,
react,
yeah.
and what they then do to develop it up.
Because
That'll be really interesting.
Yeah, because the Michelin is I think a lot of people forget, it's a pretty simple. I mean, there's tons of judging criteria. But
actually,
at
at
the
bottom
core,
line,
it's like,
it's actually relatively
if you
black
live
and
in
white.
this town, or if you're in this town, 1 star would mean you should go to this place. 2 2-star,
2 stars,
it's worth
it's
a
worth a drive.
diversion, and 3-star, it's worth a destination.
Yeah.
And it's like simple enough, and I think we can relate that to bars in a way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you also have, a side passion that you've sort of turned into a whole side hustle
Yes, the side hustle and the main hustle.
of your like photography, social, monster of your like beautiful drink photography.
Thank
How
you.
did that start?
Well, it just sort of happened naturally during lockdown. So I just opened Uno Mas with Shan Buchan and John McClellan. And we had the most amazing opening, and we had the most beautiful 4 weeks worth of trading, and then lockdown happened. So we were done. We were shut. It was definitely very difficult because we didn't have any support from HMRC, no furlough, no government grant, because we were too new of a business. So we basically couldn't prove to them that we would make X amount of money. So they refused to give us any help. So thankfully, Shan is one of those wonderful bar mentors and just a beautiful human that was like, no, we're not letting this stop the business. So we were doing takeaway drinks. We were working with donuts and food pairings and deliveries and all that fun stuff. But on the side, I was taking photos of the drinks we were making. And normally I would have been working with my photographer, Daniel McAvoy. Him and I had a wonderful relationship. I'd be the cocktail and set stylist, and then he'd come in and do the photography. But during lockdown, he was based in Glasgow, so I didn't have the ability to use him for any of the shoots. So I basically had to sit and teach myself how to use my camera. And I had an old SLR from my dad ages ago, and like I knew I had the ability to do it. I just didn't necessarily know what any of the settings meant, or anything to do with lighting, or how to do the speed pours and backdrops and all this kind of thing. So I literally just turned my apartment into a studio for the best part of a year, during lockdown, and just took millions of photos, and my entire phone is just drinks photos from lockdown. But it also allowed me to get really creative with the drinks that I was making, because I was trying to essentially make that point of standing out on social. And then brands started to get interested, and it just started to grow more and more from there. And then it turned into more sort of cocktail development for certain brands, not necessarily just the photography side. And now I've been signed with a wonderful creative agency. So Coastline Creatives look after all of my social media sort of posting accounts and contracts, which is fantastic because it actually gives me the time to actually focus on the projects and the development and the sort of presentation side of things without having to worry about, okay, I'm having to read 1,000,001 legal documents and figure all that kind of side out. So yeah, it's been a bit of a journey. It's definitely took off a lot more than I expected it to, with me just taking photos of my flat. But I'm so grateful for the opportunities that's then led, and considering it was just me making a mess in my kitchen every day, being able to now say that, I am a freelance creator is actually really quite fun.
Yeah, it's really interesting because you're sort of an influencer, but that's not what you like. When we think about an influencer, we think about somebody doing like a video like, hey, here's how to make 3 variations on an old fashioned.
The influencer term always makes me cringe just a little bit. I think that's just purely because for the last couple of years, you get hounded with that TikTok and the videos and the unboxing videos and all this kind of thing. That's definitely not what I'm wanting to achieve at all. For me, it's much more, I want to showcase the educational side of the brands, and help the bartenders and essentially be able to be there for questions and concerns. And, oh, they've had this idea for this drink with this brand, and they saw me do a post with that brand, and they want to be able to discuss it. That's the sort of thing that I want to be able to do, and work with, people like yourselves at Mott's Hennessy Assemblage, being able to bring that form of education, but also the creativeness to a bartender, that's the bit that I'm really excited about and want to focus on, not necessarily just the photography. So yeah, it's definitely more of the creative element and aspects, and giving a full rounded package as well to a brand. So rather than just being like, oh, well, I can create a drink for you and that's kind of it. It's like, okay, well, I can create a drink, but then also do your photography, do your styling, do a collaborative video. I can take it to a bar. I can then, take it wherever you want it to go, basically, and give an entire package.
Yeah, it's really interesting. There's other people doing things maybe similar, but I don't know anyone doing it exactly like you are. As I said, like most influencers like the new mixologist.
Yeah.
But it's like we can love and hate the word, but it's you have the following, which is that influencer, but it's really not from I'm making this for consumer driven stuff. It's like you're really having the art of the photography of it, but like driving the cocktail and the knowledge around it.
Yeah,
exactly. So it's interesting in that way.
My end goal would be to get more into film, and to film documentaries and showcase what bartenders are doing around the world, and do that jump into what chefs have had for years, and actually put the bartenders behind the camera and on the forefront on people's screens. And it was interesting seeing how, the jump in people searching for that sort of thing after Netflix dropping good old Drinks Masters, and then Amazon Prime doing their world-class documentary as well. There's starting to be things available, but there's not enough. Mm-hmm. Like there's hundreds of chef shows, there's hundreds of documentaries, there's hundreds of competitions that are all filmed and showcased around the world. We just don't get that same sort of visual. I mean, there is obviously that toeing the line. At the end of the day, we are technically selling poison. It's an over 18 product or over 21, or, depending on where you are. It does need to be regulated in a way
that chef shows don't.
Chef shows don't necessarily, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be able to get the chance to showcase what we are really, really good at doing. Yeah. And that's creating an atmosphere and giving people, sometimes the best night of their lives.
Yeah, I think it was only a matter of time before we got more of these shows, but I think it needed the streaming networks to do it, because they have, to put it bluntly, probably more balls.
Absolutely.
Because the liability for a major network to do it was like, we don't want to do it.
Yeah, and we'd have to show
it
it after 9:00, and it would have to be, pretty heavily regulated and all of this. But a streaming giant like Netflix or Amazon, or even, Hulu and now TV, like there's so many other avenues that we can definitely go down, and I think it's definitely something that I kind of want to stand up and try and push for. And there's so much beauty in what we do, and not necessarily just in the movements of a bartender, because at the end of the day, some of them, especially when you see people like Gina from Hanky, when she throws, that's a dance. And it's beautiful to watch. And I think we need to showcase that more. And then it's not necessarily just about the drink. I want people to know the people behind that brand, the struggles that, Mexico go through in the production of mezcal, or, the family-run tiny little hole in the wall in Rome, or to Japan, where they do the most incredible ice making, but actually look at the ice factories and see what they do. So there's so many different avenues that you can look at. It doesn't necessarily have to be, oh, here's a bunch of ingredients, make a drink in this amount of time.
I very distinctly remember the first time I saw a proper, and now every bartender does the Japanese stir. Mm-hmm. But I'm quite a bit older. And I remember I was at Havana Club Grand Prix. There was a competition they did every 2 years. I think they brought it back now.
Yeah, they have.
I was representing Canada. I flew down, but the Japanese team was on my flight, because they had flown from Japan through Vancouver, through Toronto, down to Cuba. And so they were on my flight. We got in. We all took a car in together. They brought, his name escapes me now, but he was one of the Japanese masters.
Oh, wow.
And this was bartending, this was 18 years ago, 19 years ago, where we were still struggling in Canada, and certainly we had the Dale DeGroffs in New York, and bartending was starting to become, but it was still very much like, what are you doing with your life?
Yeah.
And yet I'm looking at this 65-year-old Japanese master, and they're treating him with such respect.
Facts.
And he's a bartender. But he had been flown in because he had Havana Club 7 cocktail on his very tiny menu of maybe like 5 to 7 drinks.
Yeah.
And he sold some ridiculous like
amount.
400 cases of Havana Club 7 a year. So they flew him in for this, along with the contestants from Japan. And
what a great mentor for the contestants to have too.
and he just, at one point, through his host, he said his host said he would like to make you a drink, Jordan. I was like, yeah.
Absolutely.
And
yes,
I
please.
distinctly remember the Trident spoon. He had almost no hand move. Like there was no wrist rotation.
Mm-hmm.
It was just like fingers plucking a guitar. And this trident was spinning in place at the top, but it looked like the entire spoon wasn't moving.
The technique and the style is impeccable.
I was mesmerized by just that trident spinning. And I was like, this is incredible.
And that's the thing, a lot of bartenders around the world will have never been able to see that or experience it because they won't necessarily get the opportunity to go across the world to see it. We should showcase it.
Yeah. I was always afraid of Japanese bartenders in competitions.
Yeah, you and me both. Like, whenever you read the list, you're like, oh, okay, it's fine. Everything's fine. It's definitely that sort of drop. You know that they have been so well trained and their focus is impeccable because over there it's a craft. It is seen as that, like you were saying, there was so much respect for that man. Whereas over here, we're starting to sort of slowly see a little bit more of that, which is wonderful because I'm a huge advocate for we're not just bartenders. We're therapists half the time. We are creators. We are visionaries. We're essentially athletes working on the bar every evening. We're a multitude of things that can make a great bartender. It's not just about, the fact that you're pulling pints anymore. There's so much more to it. And I think the more that we're able to showcase that, the more the general public will actually start seeing this as a actual career and not just a filler role. I mean, I saw it as a filler role, especially during sort of my university years. When I first started out, I was like, oh yeah, this is great. But, I'll still go off and get my real job. There's always that, no, it's fine. I'll get my real job later. But then hospital, it hits you and you get stuck in hospital because it has the ability to give you so much. And that's the beauty of it. I mean, like you and myself, we've been so incredibly lucky to have been able to quite literally travel the world and to be able to, drink incredible drinks all over the place, to experience their cultures, their foods, the different languages. You don't get that from any regular day-to-day office job that your parents were pushing for. Yeah. So I think the more that we can essentially not necessarily prove our worth, but showcase our worth, I think the more we'll actually see the younger generation getting more and more involved as well.
Yeah, I remember that when I sort of made this decision, I left my 9 to 5 to focus on the thing that I'd been doing on the weekends and then did that full time. My dad distinctly was just like, when are you going to use your degree?
Oh, yeah, my parents were not happy. It took me years to get them to sort of see what I could be. I actually vividly remember this, and I will always have a special place in my heart for Alec because of it. But when I was at the basement and I'd just been given the general manager role, my parents just did not understand what that entailed. I had 18 members of staff. By the time I left, we were doing 1.3 million a year. It was, not necessarily a crazy big bar, but we were busy all the time and it was tight work. But I also had the lowest turnover of staff in the entire company. I was also doing drinks development for the other bars and so many other bits that they didn't necessarily understand. And Alec invited them in for dinner one night when I was running the bar on a busy Friday night. And he was like, don't worry about it. They're just going to come in and have dinner. I'm like, cool, yeah, no problem. I was running around like crazy. It was a mental Friday night. So didn't really get the chance to sort of speak to them properly or anything. Got to the end of the dinner. And Alec just came over with the bill. He was like, it's all been taken care of. Like, your girl's the boss. She can do that. And then basically went into my father about how beautiful this job was and how far I could go, and the fact that, you know, I was running a business at 24 years old, which is more than a lot of people could say at 24, and that I had the ability to go really, really far. And they were definitely taken aback. And I was taken aback, to be honest, because, I mean, my father's a military man. It's, I love him to pieces, but he can be difficult to to talk to in an open,
intimidating.
just a little bit, you know. But when I got home that night, both my parents had stayed up, and like my mom was just like, "We are so sorry. We just had no idea. Like we just had no idea what this entails." But by God, now that we've seen you at work, wow, like that was incredible. You were doing everything. You were running from kitchens, organizing bills, dealing with guests. Like everything was smooth. And you seemed to be everywhere, and we just never got to see it before. And that was one of the main things for me, is like they never saw it. And a lot of parents don't see their beautiful kids behind the bar absolutely smashing it on a Friday night.
Yeah, I heard something somewhere that relates, and it was about a relationship that you know, you need to see your partner, you need to see people you love doing things they're good at.
Yeah.
And then you love them more. You know, like you need to see them in control. So I imagine like your parents, you know, your dad being taken to task, but like giving, you know, seeing the window into what you had, like letting it be understood what was going on
Absolutely.
in that room. Like this isn't just chaos.
Yeah.
This is a business that she runs.
Very much organized
that she's
chaos.
the lead of. And yeah, it's, I mean, I quite love, I'm very calm in chaotic situations because
you have to be.
Of all
like
the bar side.
There's no point in beating around the bush.
Yeah.
If it's starting to get chaotic, that's when you slow down.
Yeah.
And I was lucky to learn that through all the competition side of things, and you know, I had a lot of help in terms of like mental preparation for big competitions, and you know, physio and all the sort of nutritional side of things as well. But
wait, hold on. You prepared that heavily for competitions?
I used to, yeah.
God, you scare me.
Yeah.
Okay. Walk me through this. How do you prepare for a competition?
So first things first, brief. Read the brief 1,000,001 times.
Yeah.
1,000,001. I would break it down into essentially categories into so that I could get to the main outcome that I want to do. So first things first, okay. Yes, they're obviously going to be looking at taste, but reading between the lines, how many garnish ingredients are they looking for? Is that included within the recipe? How far can I actually take the flavor components? But first things first, I always break down the original spirit. So I go to the brand and I take their words for what they describe that spirit as, and then I go and sit and I try and make sure that I can taste all of those too. And that's when the inspiration will start coming from. And that's when I can start developing the drink. For me, story definitely comes first, because that's where I get my inspiration from. And that's when I'll be like, ooh, okay, this ingredient would work really well. Or, okay, if I use this technique, that's a development factor that I could use. But then when it gets to, you know, you've taken the photo, you've done the drink, you've sent off the submission. When it comes to preparing for actually presenting, I think that's the bit that a lot of people kind of do tend to get really, really nervous about. For me, it was an opportunity to be on a stage. It was an opportunity to show. I always wanted to be an actor and actress. I always wanted to do shows and plays. So for me, I always felt really, really comfortable being in front of people. But also, when you think about it, you're behind a bar. Bar is home. When you're behind a bar, you do it every single day at work. And it's no different. They're just 4 people in front of you. They're just 4 guests. They're not judges. And for me, I always kind of definitely went to try and separate that. And whenever I've judged competitions, I've always tried to make sure that the competitor knows that they need to kind of separate that view. I'm your guest. Treat me as your guest. How would you do it in your bar? Because that's going to showcase a lot more of your own personality, but also it's going to make you feel more comfortable and therefore come across a lot more relaxed. When it comes to prep the day before, I definitely do a big carb load because I always know that in the morning I get nervous that I don't eat. So I always make sure that I have fully nutritionized the night before, and then I will like snack throughout the day, no big meals, because that just makes me feel lethargic. And then I start feeling a little bit sleepy. That starts getting my nerves going. So it's about sort of preemptively thinking about how you feel. I've been it's hilarious at Patron. So I have this trick that I learned from a really close friend of mine, a wonderful guy called Toby, who actually used to work with me back in Basement. But he's a very beautifully trained actor, went to theater school in Paris. And one of his tricks was to essentially perform in your head a song or something to 10,000 people. And then the second you go on the stage, it's four judges. You just performed in front of 10,000. So for Patron finals, they had this beautiful courtyard in Hacienda. And just before I was about to go on, I took 5 minutes. I went into the courtyard, put my headphones on, and I performed Bohemian Rhapsody as I do before every single competition in my head. But this time I sang it out loud to 50,000 people in a big stadium. And when I finished, I was like, cool, boom, done, stretched. I am ready. And then the cute little cleaning lady in the corner started clapping, and I was like, oh no, I've just given her this beautiful private performance of Bohemian Rhapsody, which everyone got a karaoke night later on in the week anyway. But yeah, there's just certain little things that I will do to hype myself up as well, because when I'm hyped, I know I'm going to bring that energy to the competition. At the end of the day, yes, going over your speeches and things is really, really important, but I'm never one for overdoing the work of the speech, because it needs to flow. It needs to be natural. And I like adding in little personal elements as well, because you can read the room. There might be an opportunity for a nice little like quick jab, or, you know, a moment to connect with the judges. So I think over preparing your speeches can be detrimental. Bullet points are your way to go. That's how I always found my flow. Because if you went a little bit off right, you still get your bullet point to kind of bring you back in. And a great trick from Chelsea Bailey, the absolute queen herself, when doing comps, use an ironing board, measure it to the same height of the bar that you're going to be presenting at, and then practice. Put your equipment exactly where it's going to be on the bar, and then it's just flow, because you know where everything is, and it's not like you're stepping onto a bar that you've never been on before. Yeah. So I always recommend that to people. When you know where your final's going to happen, or you know where your heat's going to happen, go into the bar a couple of days before or a week before. Like, hey guys, do you mind if I have a look around? Can I see where your ice? What kind of jiggers do you use? What equipment do you use? And that way, if there is something that you're not necessarily comfortable with, or it's a different style of equipment that you might want to use your own, that's when you can bring your own. So it's just thinking about not necessarily just the comp itself, but how you present yourself as a whole.
So my days of competition bartending it was the same 8 people in Toronto that competed all the time. But when I got nervous, I would do a shot before the start.
Oh yeah, I always do that. Always a tequila before I go on stage.
But then one of the things I realized early on was I loved the storytelling as well. And if my story is the length of time of the presentation, you as a judge have no time to interrupt me and like cancel my flow. So I would just keep talking.
Just word vomit.
Keep talking so that no one could interrupt and possibly change it. Later in my life, I have learned, doing a lot of presentations nowadays, that most people, where they mess up is that they don't understand the power of the pause.
Yep.
And that there's some quote where it's something like, if you pause and you start to feel uncomfortable, it's something like 3 to 5 times longer than that before the audience gets
starts.
uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And it's just like the more people, you don't say you don't say you don't try to have to collect yourself. You just pause. And then you go into whatever you're going to say next.
It holds everybody to you as well. I think what I found beautiful about Harrison's global presentation at Patron was that he did that classic pause but he would have the entire room's attention. And it was the subtle trick of, okay, no, I'm going to freshly squeeze the limes and then pause for you all to react and then continue with the story. There was just something really, really beautiful about the timing of it all, because it was just so natural. There wasn't any crazy over preparedness, and it wasn't, okay, this is exactly what I need to say at this exact time. I think also people get a little bit, up in their heads about the time limits. I always speak to whoever's doing the time. I don't want to get interrupted midway through, because a lot of times they will call you, if it's a 6-minute presentation, they'll call you at the 3-minute mark. I'm like, that's midway through my presentation. I don't want to know. Tell me at the 1 minute, because I know that if it's an 8-minute presentation, when I'm doing my speech, I know I can get it within the 6 before I, start properly building the drink. And then you get your 1 minute go. And that's when you should be pouring and having everything laid up and delightful. So yeah, it's just about knowing what makes you feel comfortable as well.
Yeah.
It's difficult to stand up and say, hey, no, actually, can you do my timer like this? When you're in a room full of bartenders and you're competing against everybody and it's all like, no, stand up. Stand up.
I used to compete in anything I could.
See, that's
so that
the other thing
so that
for
I would
me.
win, so that I was comfortable when I got to the one that I wanted.
Yeah, like I was a big advocate for definitely doing lots of sort of smaller competitions to get the feel, get yourself sort of into that style of competition bartending. But when it comes to one of the big ones, like World Class or Patron or, the Amaro Montenegro comp, or, one of the core sort of main ones that are focused in a global final, focus on one. Don't try and do all 3 in a year, because you're going to let something slip and you're not going to be able to give your full focus and your full time. So if you want to go and win a global comp, you focus on that comp for that year. Learn everything you can about that brand, immerse yourself in all their trainings, all their tastings, utilize the market and utilize what they're offering as well, because that's going to give you a much greater chance of then doing really, really well and getting that recognition for the hard work. Mm-hmm. So in my head, yes, do lots of comps, but if you really, really want to win one, and focus on the one.
Yeah.
Because I think people spread themselves quite, because I was the worst at it. Because I was like, I just want to do everything. And then you burn out.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Like the year I won UK Patron, it was the only comp that I did that whole year. I didn't do anything else. I essentially treated it as a second job, especially because we had that sort of social media element incorporated, because we obviously had the first half of it was during lockdown. So I didn't actually get to present my drink in person. I got to send my box in the post and pray to God that it arrived in time for the judges to taste it. But I never got to present them with the drink myself. It was all a video recording that we then had to send in, which was almost even harder, because you can't then connect with the judges and you can't then give that sort of personality through. It's a lot harder to do when you're filming yourself making a drink in your bar and being like, hi, I'm Kat, this is my drink today.
Yeah.
It was difficult to be like, no, actually, okay, this is who I am, like this is the bev that I've made, and yes, I've put it in a box. So yeah, why not?
Yeah, but you've certainly got more time to think about it over the pandemic. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But being able to go out and then present in front of people that's when I felt at home. At the end of the day, you're behind a bar. Behind a bar is where home is.
Yeah. I told, when I was first hired by Hennessy, they said, where are you, what are you comfortable doing? I was like, if I'm talking about alcohol, and I'm behind a bar, I'll be fine.
Yep.
If you,
like anything could happen in that moment,
yeah,
and I'm grand.
it's the defense. There's a barrier. There's a barrier between me and you.
Yeah.
Like psychologically, that's a thing. And then on top of that, I'm talking about something I'm comfortable. If you want me to discuss politics and sit on a couch, it's going to be a different story.
Yep.
We might get into different territory. But alcohol behind a bar, I'll be fine.
Totally agree with that. And I think that was a beautiful moment, actually. It was the last time, I think it might not have been the last time you were here, but when you were here, my father and my fiance were in having a drink too. And that moment of all of you bonding over a glass of Hennessy XO was genuinely one of the most beautiful things ever. And standing behind the bar and watching those connections happen, I think that's really, really special as well, is being able to see how your guests are able to create beautiful moments, to make those core friendships and to make those core memories from something that you've done by standing behind the bar.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, I believe your dad was sitting in the seat right behind you.
Actually was.
Yeah,
He was. And he will now, he has lots of Hennessy XO in the house now. So,
brilliant.
yeah, well done.
Doing my job.
Yeah, absolutely.
Speaking of drinks,
You need a
I
refreshment.
think you have a drink for us.
I do. I have a cheeky beverage.
Perfect.
So there's a little part of me, funnily enough, that loves a little bit of tequila. And it's one of those ones that people are kind of afraid to use sort of a stirred down and brown tequila beverage. I think it kind of, apart from the Rosita, there isn't really any kind of big, well-known kind of cocktails along that route. So I've been trying, it's definitely something that I've been trying to utilize and sort of do a variation of sort of, down the line of Red Hook, Manhattan, Vucare style, but with tequila.
Okay.
And giving that cognac that sort of roundedness to help elevate those agave flavors, but then bring in that oakiness and the honey. And I think it blends really, really beautifully together. I mean, tequila and cognac are the two things that I shot the most regularly. So, yeah, I figured why not put them together and create something
You
down
put
and
them
brown.
together.
Yeah.
All right, let's do it.
So let's do it. All right. And hello.
Perfect. Cheers.
Cheers. Salute.
You really get the tequila on the nose.
Yeah.
And then I quite like that where it's deceptive. You're like, uh-oh. And then you're right, the cherry works really well with the cognac. And I'm surprised how well the Blanco goes with that.
Right?
Yeah.
Everybody expects, no, you should be using a reposado, you should be using an anejo because you've got that extra added caramelization. But for me, you kind of want that sharpness to cut through all the other sugars that are going on. And agave is one of those beautiful, fresh flavors, and you get that sort of pepperiness on the back. And that's why I really like adding in the touch of Fernet, because that herbaceousness then just elongates the finish over and over.
Yeah, that's, I think split bases are really intriguing cocktails. Yeah. Cognac has more than most, and historically anyway. And I think people are so afraid to play in that world. Like it's so much easier to take a base and complement it, but to take a split, especially when they're maybe not polar opposites, but quite a far distance apart, is a really unique thing. Especially something like XO, which is big and bold and spicy, versus
and I think
maybe like a bordery VS that would be more floral. Really interesting. Nicely done.
So I think that's kind of why I like playing around with tequila quite a lot, because it can do some really surprising things with flavor. I think a lot of people automatically assume like, okay, the anejo is going to be excessively sweet if I use it this way, but actually there's something with that beautiful agave flavor that when you add just that tiny dash of salt, especially, your palomas, you get that spicy freshness. And that's what I love about it, is that it brings just a whole other dynamic to what would originally be just sort of like a classic stirred down cocktail. It brings a new form of life to it overall.
So I want to ask you a very simple question about your mixing glass. Mm-hmm. You're using metal here.
Yes.
At the bar, and I would use that for my traveling mixer because obviously it's not going to break as easily. But I find it interesting that you choose that. What's the reason?
So there was a multitude of reasons, but we actually did a bunch of different sort of tests. And actually for speed and accuracy, we found that the metal tins were actually giving us a lot more sort of sustainability in terms of like what's the word? Consistency, that's the one. Yep. In terms of our service. It's not as breakable as glass. I also find that if I'm using a glass mixer, I want to have it on ice constantly to keep it at temperature, whereas with your metal tins, you don't need to do that in the same sort of way. So yeah, it wasn't necessarily just like a personal choice. It was a team choice as well. And I mean, if Eric was using metal tins, If it ain't broke.
I noticed it specifically because, like, I noticed it, but then put it out of my mind. But then with your high pour, you get a very accurate and like easy cut when you stop pouring it, because the metal is obviously, other than crystal, it's gonna have a very fine edge. Yeah.
So you get that beautiful, almost like teardrop pour. And especially when you're wanting to do fast, quick dumps as well, when you're under the pump, you know that you've got that accuracy still. So yeah, it's definitely, I mean, it's one of the ones I use at home as well. I tend to always lean towards tin. And yeah, it's interesting. I'm doing quite a lot of work with stoneware and sort of porcelain at the moment. So I'm going to start doing more tests with looking at how stone reacts as the mixing tin, and looking at the variations in how it holds temperature against variations like glass and other metals.
So I remember, I think it was Suntory did a one-off jigger for some of their bartenders as a porcelain jigger, and Gabe Orta had one at his bar in Miami, Broken Shaker.
That's it.
Yeah. And it was on the floor. Like, they have this wall of like knickknacks, and it's there. And I'm like, Gabe, that's precious.
Yep.
And he's like, yeah, but it looks cool there, and we're not going to use it. Somebody will break it. And I was like, I think I had a lot of fun that night, and I was like, I'll give you $100 for it right now. And he just was like, no, 120. And it's just like, no.
Oh, and that was the hardest bargain he could drive.
and it like, he just kept saying no. And I got to like, I think I got to $200. And because at that point I was just like, I was hoping he wasn't going to say yes at that point, but I was just like,
no, I have to keep going.
And then he just kept saying no. And I was like, fine. Whatever.
Yep.
It's like, I could just take it. Like,
I could just lift it and put it in my pocket. But yeah.
So I hope that porcelain shaker is still there.
I hope so too.
I hope it's like glued down.
I really
that,
hope so.
Like, nobody can take it.
That would be devastating. Like, genuinely devastating.
Yeah.
If it is gone though, we'll find a way to make him a new one.
Important note: I don't steal things from bars, because I worked in bars and I know that's the most annoying
frustrating
thing. Like, so many people think that stuff is free.
They're
like, I paid for the drink, so this glass is mine, right?
The Ritz did it, or somewhere did it when, and they literally just stamped under their coasters and like all the pens and everything that you would normally just, whack in your pocket, as people do. It says stolen from the Ritz on the bottom. They stamped it.
I heard
or
it.
Like
I
stolen
think it was
from
like
somewhere. I can't remember what it was from.
I think it's like Virgin Airways has done it too.
Yeah.
And they may have taken it from the Ritz or vice versa, but like, I think it was on like salt shakers in first class or something like that. They're like
stolen from Virgin Atlantic.
Yeah, and it's like, it's genius. Like, if somebody's going to steal,
so clever.
At least make it
exactly, and then they know where it's coming from.
You've worked your cost in.
And then you've got a nice little story to tell along the way. But yeah, there's a good bit of fun to be had, that's for sure.
I always remember working in pubs and having people try to, I had people try to steal the Hoegaarden glasses.
Oh my gosh,
the big, like, 22-ounce pints, but the, like, weighed about 5 pounds each. And it was just, I was like,
I mean, to be fair,
buddy, I can see that under your shirt.
We had a similar thing. Like, we had the most gorgeous whiskey glasses upstairs in an American bar, but they're hefty weighted and they're not cheap. They're beautiful, but they are not cheap.
Some crazy Waterford
the
crystal.
amount of people that are like, oh, this is such a beautiful whiskey glass. Can we take it home? Like, no, you can't, because we need them for people that want to drink whiskey. But here's the website that you can go and buy it from. And then majority of the time, you get a little chuckle out of them. But there was this one gentleman who just looks at me dead in the eye as I was bartending and just grabbed the whiskey glass and just put it straight in his jacket, as if it was nothing. Like, we weren't going to do anything about it. I'm like, I mean, kudos, mad balls. But just know. Just know. I never really understood why people thought that was like a great idea to do when you're in a bar. Like, I'm all here for having fun and everything else, but there's definitely moments where things start crossing a line.
Yeah, and bars could do way better presentations if they knew you weren't going to steal it.
If we knew we weren't going to get it stolen.
Yeah.
It's like, well, yes, okay, I would love to do this kind of a glass, or I would love to do, this ceramic variation, or I would love to do like something really cool in the corner. But I can't because it's going to get robbed.
A golden ice pick or a golden
My
garnish
God.
pick, anything like
The
that.
amount
Like
that we go through is
you could
insane.
like those kind of things. Add a touch of class, add a touch of, the French je ne sais quoi, and it's amazing. You want a crystal glass? Those are delicate all by themselves without being stolen.
Yep.
There's a cost to that. And when people take from that, then a bar has to be like, maybe we don't go crystal anymore. Maybe we go glass.
Yep.
And it's going to take away from
Away
your
from that
experience.
element.
Yeah.
100%. So, yeah, I'm all for having fun and games, but there's definitely a few times where it just crosses a line, Like, we should all be supporting one another as well, too. So, yeah.
Do you have a favorite glass? Do you have a favorite style you go for? I'll give you an example. I've got, I sometimes like a heavy rocks glass for just like a neat pour of something.
Oh, yeah.
But
I want weight when I'm having a neat pour.
But there's an interesting experience. If you've never tried it, I'll encourage you to. Like, Riedel has like a rocks glass shape, but they call it like a water glass. But it's a rocks glass shape, and it's the thinnest crystal you'll ever have.
Yeah, I have had
and
that.
having
It's
a
so
neat pour
light.
in that, it's like the entire weight.
It's like it's literally
The
like
glass
it's just your hand.
weighs, I don't know, like a tenth of an ounce. And so the entire weight is the liquid inside. And there's something very, very beautiful about it. I don't want an ice cube in that kind of glass.
No.
Don't want anything. But like, is there a glass that like blows you away? Is there a glass that, has made a great cocktail for you?
I mean, I'm definitely one to lean towards a beautiful slimlined highball. I really love those beautiful straight lines with a short curve at the bottom. I do love any kind of glass that has a really thin lip. I'm not a big fan of those like thick lips because you want to be able to sort of, there's just something really classy about having that from something elegant. But to be honest, I mean, I grew up being a wine girl. So I grew up in Belgium and around Europe, and we would go to vineyards for our holidays, which I definitely wasn't complaining about when you're 6 years old and you're running through grapevines.
Hold on. Your parents took you to vineyards as a child.
Yeah, they did.
And they wondered why you entered
I
this
know,
industry.
right? Crazy. Mind blowing that they didn't put two and two together.
Yeah.
No, we were very much the wine family. We would go and just do vineyards. And I mean, I think I did the Moët and Chandon in their secondary place down in Provence when I was about, 6 years old. And I grew up with having watered down wine at dinner. It was just the thing to do in Brussels when it was, 94, 95. That was just how it was done in Europe. There wasn't the whole poulali about kids having wine or tasters. So I definitely sort of dabbled in wine a lot more when I was starting to get introduced to sort of the bartending scene and that sort of thing. It's definitely why I leant more towards champagne. But growing up on wine, there's something about a beautiful wine glass and a really beautiful thin stem, light, a core beautiful base body, and then a beautiful light lip.
Yeah.
There's something really, really elegant about that. And it can be utilized in cocktails too. I'm a big fan for using wine glasses for drinks. I think they're underutilized just for being wine. But yeah, there was a beautiful design that was almost geometric. So it was a circular base, but then it came up into a slightly smaller top, but it was ridges all the way around. And it was just so subtly elegant.
Like the Italicus bottle, sort of?
Very similar, yes. And there was just something so elegant about that I knew you could do so much in terms of garnish work on that glass because you could utilize the edges that were already there. Because it had such a deep bowl, the nose that you got from it was stunning. So if you had a really floral cocktail, the nose that you were then going to get from that and the experience that was then going to enhance that drink was next to none rather than using it in a rocks glass. So yeah, I'm a big fan of utilizing wine glasses. And to be honest, utilizing any kind of glass for something other than what it's originally supposed to be seen to. I think we're at that time now where we're able to kind of break those molds because there's so many different drinks coming out. There's so many new techniques and flavors. I don't think there needs to be a specific glass for a specific drink. I think in
Yeah.
classic cocktail bars, yes, absolutely. But I think, does it really, really matter what you're putting it in if it is beautiful and it's doing its job and it's,
But yeah, understanding the what is happening there.
exactly.
I had a great conversation with. I feel like this is bartender name dropping, but the 10th and 11th generation of the Riedel glass family, George and Maximilian Riedel, and the son Max is working with a university in Austria. They're based out of Kufstein.
Okay.
And they are basically trying to prove through science what Riedel already knows. And what they know is how an outward-facing lip is going to do to the taste, how the curvature in one place or another is going to affect one. Like they've got a New World Pinot Noir glass. They've got an Old World Pinot Noir
glass.
They have they actually have a Hennessy XO glass specifically for Hennessy XO, not other XOs. They have another XO glass, but they have a Hennessy XO glass. They have a Hennessy VSOP glass. They made a Hennessy Paradis glass, but they get it. They have a glass for Coca-Cola, so it's like they understand what is going to amplify the core element. A little bit like you in your competitions. You read what the brand says about it, then you have to taste it, and they want to amplify those. And it's that stuff on such a nerdy level is so fascinating to me.
It really is. I can nerd out about glassware for a very long time. And I'm an avid fan of how, countries like Mexico utilize ceramic and how they utilize stone. Same with the Japanese serves. You see a lot more of that over there, whereas the UK is predominantly glass. You don't really see anything else out there.
I think the only thing other than glass I've been served in the UK was years ago at Bramble in Edinburgh.
Bramble,
and because the owner at Bramble, or one of the owners at Bramble, I'm not sure, was involved in the launch of Hendrix. I think it was like prominent Scottish bar people were involved in the launch of Hendrix. And so he had these martini glasses, like martini stem with a teacup on top. So classic porcelain teacup. And I was served a drink in that. And as like a Canadian bartender that was over in Edinburgh, like visiting my Scottish family, I was like, it was mind blowing. Like melt my brain with like a piece of POS from Hendrix. It was amazing.
Yeah. And it can change your entire experience about the cocktail. I mean, at the end of the day, yes, it has to taste delicious. But visually and also just in like temperature control and the flavor profile, utilizing other forms of drinkware, I think it's definitely going to be something that we're going to see a hell of a lot more in the next couple of years.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, really cool. And I'm totally here for it.
Yeah. So what have you seen in Mexico as far as like stone drinkware?
So there was a beautiful serve actually in a couple of places. It's not even just like one bar utilizes it. Every main bar will have a sort of ceramic variation serve. So whether it's porcelain or, they stick to more of that traditional.
Like the red clay?
Yeah, that kind of red clay stone cup. And I loved that because you're drinking their culture. You're drinking a little bit of them. You're drinking a little bit of something different. And yeah, there was just something really beautiful about the visuals behind it as well. I was drawn to that more than anything else because the presentation itself was just absolutely mind-blowing. And I think it'll be interesting to see how people sort of strip that back as well, because obviously there's quite a lot of color. You can do a lot of sort of craziness with it all. But I think it'd be interesting to see sort of like a stripped back variation of what, people view as a coffee cup.
Yeah.
What could that then turn into?
Yeah, and they've got the little, what are the little, is it copita?
The copitas, yeah.
The little mezcal kind of shooting devices.
I have far too many of them at home.
But like I remember in a competition, Hennessy My Way has a sustainable element, and somebody, I believe it was from Mexico, was talking about like they're using the red clay purposely because if it ever breaks, they just can throw it outside into the red clay street, and it will just grind back into clay, and somebody will make new,
and it will be back
plateware
there
out of it.
4 years later as the same thing.
Yeah. Interestingly, though, somebody also said that, like, somebody, I don't know, middle Europe, maybe edge of Asia, whatever, was, commenting that glass has a 15,000 year decay time in nature. And I was like, what? Like, glass is, as far as I understand it, one of the easiest things to recycle. But one of the things I've learned about sustainability is everywhere's different.
Yep.
Everywhere has different concerns. Everyone has
Exactly.
different, Mexico doesn't worry about limes. They're
Yeah.
not making super juice in Mexico.
They don't need to.
They make all the limes.
They make all the limes.
Yeah. Canada doesn't give a shit about water conservation.
Yeah.
We've got it all.
You've got it all.
So it was a very interesting thing to watch that. But like the clay in one part, the glass decay time was a new one for me. But to each their own.
Yeah, each to their own. But I think there's also that element of being able to look at new ways of being sustainable and opening up those conversations and kind of questioning ourselves. Can we be better? Can we be doing more? At the end of the day, we kind of want our planet to stick around, preferably. Yeah. So, the more that we can do as bartenders and reducing our waste and keeping that talk about conservation alive, I think that's definitely going to help us in the future for sure, because it needs to still stay a part of the conversation.
Do you have a lot of those thoughts when you're
I do,
constructing
yeah,
new drinks?
definitely.
Yeah.
I always try and be as sustainable as possible. It's definitely always been something that was sort of driven into me from a relatively sort of young part within my bartending career. It was one of the first things that one of my mentors kind of said, look, this is how you can stand out, because you're also not necessarily just thinking about your drink, you're thinking about the bar as a whole, the planet as a whole. I think the work that they did with Trash Tiki, and when I was working with Altos, when I did the Tohono Society, creating that program and realizing that actually, I could go to Mexico, present this, and get 50,000 pounds to make this actually happen. I could make a hospitality garden in my city. They're very much still a part of the conversation. But there's always more. I always feel like we could be doing more. And especially, big hotels, it's difficult. They have their way of doing things when it comes to trash and things. But there's always more that we could be doing. Yeah. In terms of separation and, we've got a big compactor out back, and we've got all of our glass recycling down to a T. Same with food recycling. But there's always more. There's always more.
I think it can be... great creativity can come from putting restraints on yourself in some ways.
Absolutely. Having to refine
and then
yourself
drive you
to
in a new direction.
Only use local resource ingredients, or I'm an avid fan of foraging. There's a couple of really good local companies here in London that do foraging in groups, so that you're with somebody that's trained and knows what not to pick up in the streets of London or in the parks.
Yeah, in the streets of London, you shouldn't pick up a lot.
No, you should not. But there's definitely areas in certain parks that have the ability of being able to be foraged. So going with somebody that knows that land and knows the area well to do it safely is always a big bonus. But yeah, I like putting those kind of restraints on it, because it also means that it narrows down that sort of crazy minds where you just have 1,000,001 ideas, and it actually narrows in your focus. And then you create a beautiful, stunning drink that has all of its elements lined up in one, because you spent the time to minimize it. Yeah. Because I find that if I have not enough constraints, then I'll make 40 drinks when I could have made 3.
So, do you have any advice for a young bartender coming up now?
Yeah, I think go out and ask questions. Like, go to the bars that you haven't been to. Reach out to people. A lot of folk tend to think, you have that sort of, I don't necessarily like using the word, but they're like, those star bartenders, the ones that are in the mags and getting talked about and everything else. I actually really love it when I'm able to just speak to somebody that's wanting to know more, that's wanting to learn that wants to give that effort and energy into the business, just reach out. Genuinely, just reach out. Because the amount of people that I have and the knowledge that I've been able to gain just by going out and being like, hey, you're this person. I like your work. Can we talk about stuff? How did you do this? How did you do that? And I've never had any of them come back and be like, no, I'm not going to share that with you.
No.
Because it's just not the way of our industry either.
Yeah.
We're open people because we have to be.
Yeah. I had friend Yanni Fry just laughs at like our drinks, that intellectual property.
Yeah.
We can never guard that.
Yeah,
So
like,
might as well
come
tell
on.
everybody what it is.
Exactly, 100%.
And hopefully they're honest and say, you know what, Kat Whyte
Yeah.
showed me, this is her recipe
Yeah.
that I'm now
Or like we
reproducing.
did a riff off of this drink from
Yeah.
this bar
Yeah.
because we saw their technique, you know? Like we should be building each other up. At the end of the day, it's yes, it's a big industry, but it's also a small enough industry that it is family.
Yeah. I would also say for anybody reaching out to somebody, if you have the confidence to reach out once, follow up, because you could have caught somebody at the busiest week of their life. You don't know what's going on you never know what's going on in somebody else's life. If it's busy, they're probably not posting it online. So follow up.
Yeah.
Nobody means to not get back to you. It just could be crazy.
Exactly.
And that little tap on the shoulder to be like, hey, just checking in here.
Yeah.
How are you?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm in London for the first time ever. I'm not actually in London for the first time ever, but if I were.
If you were, okay.
And I'm into cocktails, I'm into food.
Yep.
I'm here for a weekend. Where do I go?
All right. So, I mean, I've only really been here, technically living here for just over a year, but it was kind of, the home away from home. So there's a couple of spots that I know for sure that you definitely have to go to. First and foremost, for a good cocktail, you got to hit up Satan's Whiskers. They are an incredibly special team. The space itself is fantastic. Their tunes are always on point. But the style of service and the beautiful balance of every single cocktail and their attention to detail on every single drink is absolutely astonishing. And yeah, I've, again, never had a bad night there. And you'll always end up running into someone you know as well, which is always a good bit of fun. So highly recommend Satan's. It's kind of like the neighborhood bar that I would say go to. In terms of sort of more avant-garde cocktails, I'm a big fan of the new Quaint. Absolutely beautiful space. Love the style of the way that they've done the bar with the guys on the outside with the folks on the center. It's just a really well curated menu as well. Lots of variants and options for all types of palates, which is definitely something that I look for. And then if you're wanting some just good pub grub and like good pub vibes, there's a wonderful bar in Camden, and everyone gives me crap for living in Camden, but do not underrate it. It is incredible. I mean, Electric Ballroom's around the corner from my house, so you can't really go too wrong. But Camden Eye has some of the best pints on draft. Super fun, just classic London environment. Makes you feel young again. And then in terms of food, it kind of depends whether you want to go full out or not. One of the places that I always recommend to people is Fallow. Fallow, just around the corner from Tottenham Court Road, is genuinely one of the best Sunday roasts I've ever had. But also in terms of the flavors and the palettes that they're doing, they've got an open kitchen so you can see everything as well. You get all of those smells running through the restaurant. Service has always been impeccable. They have Ruinart Blanc de Blanc as their house. I'm a happy gal every time I go there, for sure.
Nice.
Yeah. But I mean, that's the thing. London, there is so much choice. Like, there's no way I'm ever going to be able to get to everywhere that I want to go in London. I'm definitely working my way through the list. So the next time I find another new spot, I'll send you a message. But yeah, we're spoiled. We're absolutely spoiled.
And
You have
great
everything.
opening every month. Yeah.
Oh yeah, like cannot keep track. My new favorite, there's 2 new openings actually in the last year that have really, really stood out. First is Dram, just opposite Tottenham Court Road. absolutely incredible space, split over essentially 3 floors worth. You've got a beautiful heated outdoor terrace. You have a private pool room with a cocktail sort of vending machine. You've got the cocktail bar in the downstairs area. When you enter, you've essentially got a whiskey heaven and a whiskey shop attached to it. They've thought of every single element of what that building could offer, and they have utilized it in the best kind of way. And obviously their staff are incredible. And the other one's Viajante in Notting Hill. It's fun. It is a ball. Their opening party was one of the best I've been to in a long time. Obviously cocktails, incredible. Their spicy paloma is muy picante. And they've just started doing, I mean, it was obviously opened by Pietro and his partner. And it is just one of those really special places where they have traveled the majority of South America's and Latin America, and they are bringing those flavors and those beautiful elements to Notting Hill. And they're doing a massive takeover series essentially for the next like couple of months, where they're bringing over guys from Peru, from Sao Paulo, from everywhere. And that's really, really exciting. And I love seeing people kind of push the boundaries and bringing other cultures and bringing other experiences over.
Genius.
Yeah, absolute genius. So yeah, you're spoiled for choice, mate.
Okay, and finally, where can people find you?
So I am at the American Bar at the Savoy, usually two days a week, but it does change. So if you do want to come in and see me, just shoot me a message and I'll make sure that I actually let you know when I'm there. And then the rest of the time you will find me floating about, working with a bunch of different brands. You never know, might see me at Fashion Weeks coming up in the next year, which would be super exciting.
Nice.
And yeah, just trying to blend the beauty of booze and fashion and art all together in one cute little package.
And people should get a hold of you through socials?
Yeah, Instagram's the go-to. I'm too old for TikTok, so I don't have one of those. But Instagram, you can find me at White Tales. Website coming soon.
And white is not spelled normally.
No, it's it's the WHYTE, just to be awkward and be difficult on every form ever.
Yeah, genius.
Yeah, genius.
All right. Well, thanks very much.
No, thank you. It's been
Cheers
a pleasure
to you.
as always. Thank you for having me.